I did state it in the past that doing the month or marathon off of any show should only happen once, and since I did a month of We Bear Bears nearly 5 years ago, in all honesty, rules were meant to be broken some occasions, and this rule itself really felt too difficult for me to avoid with this show. Even though that including this at the last minute when I made up my mind on doing this ×3 marathon was mostly out of the blue, to the point that other Cartoon Network shows would have taken this spot a lot more. Truth be told, I really don't want to overwhelm myself, and I want to do something a lot more simpler in order to basically review everything else that there is from We Bear Bears. And since that there was not enough episodes to fill up all the days of this ×3 marathon, I have to include the episodes from its spin-off We Baby Bears. Truth be told, if I actually included another Cartoon Network show as part of Summerpalooza 6 to make this a ×4 marathon, it would have been Summer Camp Island, since in the season of summer it does make sense, and I was going to pick Infinity Train over that, but with it being less episodes, it's not going to work. But at the same time, it will put me into a lot more of a stressful time in order to focus on 4 shows rather than 3, and 3 is literally the limit that people shouldn't go through unless if they have all the time of the world like I do. All the while doing a ×3 marathon of 3 shows and reviewing 1 episode from each show 3 times per day. And that's not even counting the bonus videos. So, less said about that the better. Let's get into the very first episode of We Bear Bears, Our Stuff. The premise of this episode is that before they played basketball with the other players, they threw all their stuff inside their backpack, and after they're done playing basketball, they witness that their backpack has gone missing as someone stole it. They immediately try to get some help from people in San Francisco in order to get the missing bag, but at the same time, with this being the world building of We Bear Bears, it really showcases the society not being on board to side with the bears due to them being bears. Those are reasons onto why I had a difficult time on considering on reviewing this episode, even though it's not as difficult as it seems. Even though that the focus centers around the bears finding their backpack, this is also before we get the introduction of the other characters that appear throughout the show. And considering that we get to see what San Francisco is mostly like when it comes to how humans are portrayed in this, keep in mind when I'm gonna revisit the We Bear Bears movie towards the end of Summerpalooza 6, those pretty much a reason onto why I had a difficult time getting back into that movie after watching it, since I've watched that movie before getting into this show. Just because We Bear Bears is one of my favorite cartoons doesn't mean that this show is immune of me remembering every single detail of it. And seeing these 3 bears for the first time when they made their debut nearly 11 years ago really sums up a lot that this is really a work in progress when it comes to basically everything else. Like the pigeons, I never talked about the pigeons, and I am going to talk about them more since that they do have episodes in this show. And every time I remember these characters, Grizz, Panda, and Icebear, doing their thing in order to achieve their missing backpack. And all honestly, with them being way more in the one, it's mainly in the point of view of the citizens of San Francisco. And this is before we met Chloe, Lucy, Ranger Tapes, and even Charlie. with the premise of the Bells trying to retrieve the backpack, if there's one thing that they do get right is that someone did steal the backpack. Or in this case, a group of creatures stealing the backpack. But it doesn't change the fact that they actually thought that this human was the one who stole the backpack, which in reality it's not really the case, since that there are different items inside of the backpack rather than the items that the Bells put in. And since that this pigeon was the reason that their backpack was stolen, honestly, me not remembering the pigeon episodes, especially from this episode alone, really shows that even shows that I enjoy the most have episodes that are supposed to be important are also the ones that I forget the most. And since this is the first episode, the importance wasn't really there for me, which is really awkward considering that other episodes later on I remember the most. But since that this is an episodic show, which is something I don't take fondly in other shows, I can easily forgive this show a little bit more, judging the fact that this first episode isn't really that bad. When the Bells try to find their backpack, which turns out to be the wrong backpack, when there's a basketball game going on the TV in this guy's apartment, the announcer says what the players are doing in the game, and the Bells are doing the same things as what the announcer said from the TV. Honestly, it's something that I don't enjoy much, but looking back for preparation for this review, it's actually kind of clever considering that there are attributes that the Bells can do, even though they're not really good at basketball. When this episode came out and they got better in Charlie Ball, which I am going to talk about later on in this marathon. And since that they managed to get off scot-free, since that they found the true robbery of their own backpack, which was the pigeons, honestly, the way the citizens are portrayed in this on being rude honestly forgets on what really happened, since that they just do their own thing entirely and act like nothing like this happened. And this whole situation towards the end was all caught on camera and on the perspective on everyone else's phones who are witnessing this, with the Bells falling off onto a trampoline and straight to basically where the missing backpack was. If you ask me, it really says a lot that how this episode progressed, it really gave me the impression that it just felt a lot more difficult to consider on the fact that whenever the Bells tried to do something to get, in order to be accepted in society, it just feels like there's some other solution that they can't be able to bypass, but there's a way to bypass them avoiding consequences. Like I said, I am going to revisit the movie, just you're gonna have to wait for the next 3 months. So, with that being said, this episode is the weakest introduction compared to OKKO and Quake of the Creek, but it's not a bad episode. There are some good things here and there, but since that I watched way more better episodes from We Bare Bells, this episode will most likely be forgotten unless if you're really into basketball and basically the nature of what We Bare Bells has to offer. I did enjoy this show, and I do admit that I do appreciate the creativity here and now, but at the same time, if I never did this marathon, including it in the last minute with a kick-ass intro, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to review this episode at all, which is mostly rare for me to say when it comes to making last minute decisions on including material that I wasn't planning on beforehand. And with this being part of Summerpalooza 6, I had to include this episode because there was not a lot of episodes of this show for me to review to fill up the majority of this marathon compared to OKKO and Quake of the Creek, since I did review most of this show compared to Quake of the Creek and OKKO. But I found some of the solutions of reviewing its spin-offs episodes along with the Baby Bear episodes from the main series, so there are ways to make this work, just as long as I'm able to structure them correctly. Believe me, as much as We Bare Bears is a show that I have more knowledge compared to Quake of the Creek and OKKO, that doesn't mean that this was easy for me to put together. I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10, and that's day 1 down.